You really think you can just tear them down? I shouted, my voice cutting across the quiet cul-de-sac like a warning bell. And for a moment, the world seemed to pause as Karen Whitmore froze mid-step, her hands gripping the edges of the stickers I had carefully placed on my mailbox and front gate. Stickers that a judge had specifically authorized for display just last week. The evening sun was dipping low behind the maple trees lining the street, casting long shadows across the asphalt, and the smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the faint metallic scent of the mailbox, a strange combination that somehow made the moment feel more tense. I could see the way the light caught the edges of the torn paper in her hands, the jagged corners fluttering in the breeze like tiny flags of defiance, and my stomach knotted with a mix of disbelief and determination. My name is Ethan Parker, and I had moved into this neighborhood believing in quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and a community that respected the law. But Karen, the HOA board member who seemed to take particular pleasure in asserting control, was intent on making an example out of anyone who dared to follow the rules without seeking her permission. I stepped closer, my sneakers crunching against the gravel driveway, and I noticed the faint aroma of rubber from the soles mingling with the lingering scent of the sticker's adhesive, a detail I could never have imagined noticing until now. Yet it felt critical in this frozen moment, grounding me in the reality of her audacity. She smirked, tilting her head, clearly unaware that the small piece of paper I held in my pocket, crisp, official, stamped by the local court, was about to change the game entirely. The quiet hum of a passing car on the nearby street punctuated the tension, mixing with the distant chirping of birds settling in for the night, creating a soundscape that was almost cinematic in its intensity, as though the neighborhood itself was holding its breath alongside me. "Those are ugly, Ethan," she said, her tone dripping with mockery. Yet beneath it I could sense the fear that she was about to lose control, a crack in the facade she had worked so hard to maintain. I ran a hand along the edges of the mailbox, feeling the cold metal under my fingers, the tactile reality grounding me while my mind raced through the steps I had taken to make sure my rights were protected, each memory vivid. Filing the paperwork, waiting through the interminable hearings, the moment the judge had signed off on the stickers, and the quiet victory that had felt almost private until now. The air was thick with anticipation, the smell of warm asphalt from the afternoon sun still clinging to the street, mixing with the faint floral notes from the hedge lining my property, a sensory mosaic that made every detail, her movements, the fluttering stickers, my own heartbeat, sharper, more immediate. And then, with a calm I barely felt but projected with every ounce of conviction, I held up the court order between us, letting the sunlight illuminate the seal and the official stamps, and I said, "What she doesn't know is that a judge already decided these belong here." The paper caught the golden rays just enough to glint, a subtle signal that the power balance had shifted, and I watched her expression flicker, confusion and irritation crossing her face as she realized that her authority had limits she had never considered. The shadows lengthened, the evening deepening around us. Yet there was a strange clarity in that moment, a crystallization of right versus wrong, and I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction knowing that the small act of defiance she had committed would not go unchallenged. The scent of the stickers, faint but lingering, the subtle sound of the paper rustling in my hand, the warmth of the sun fading on my skin, all of it combined into a sensory signature of a single truth. Justice doesn't always announce itself with noise, but when it arrives, it lands with precision. I took a step back, letting the warm glow of the evening settle around me as I surveyed the small yard that had become the center of this unspoken battle, noticing the way the sunlight played across the freshly trimmed hedges and the slight shimmer on the mailbox where the stickers had once clung firmly, and I felt a mixture of disbelief and resolve tighten in my chest. Karen shifted her weight, crossing her arms as she watched me, her sharp heels clicking lightly on the concrete path leading to the front porch, each sound echoing through the quiet street like a deliberate punctuation, a reminder that every motion mattered in this delicate dance of confrontation. I adjusted the grip on the court order in my hand, feeling the smooth weight of the paper and the embossed seal beneath my fingertips, and I reminded myself of the hours I had spent gathering evidence, documenting every interaction, and consulting with legal counsel, all of it building toward this precise moment where the truth could no longer be ignored. The subtle scent of pine from the surrounding trees mixed with the faint aroma of sun-warmed asphalt, creating a sensory backdrop that seemed almost cinematic, intensifying the tension in the air as I took another step closer, careful to keep my movements measured yet unmistakably confident. Karen tilted her head slightly, her expression flickering between irritation and disbelief as I held my ground, and I could see her glancing briefly toward the neighbors' homes, perhaps weighing the social ramifications of the confrontation, the unspoken judgment that might settle upon her if she misstepped. I drew a slow breath, letting the cool evening air fill my lungs, noticing the faint rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze and the distant hum of a passing car, all of it sharpening my awareness and forcing every detail into crystal clarity as if the world had condensed around this singular point of tension. I spoke calmly but firmly, explaining the specifics of the court order, detailing the permissions granted and the limitations imposed, letting the words carry the weight of authority without raising my voice, knowing that precision and clarity would speak louder than any emotional outburst. The sound of paper shifting as I referenced specific paragraphs, combined with the crisp tone of my explanation, seemed to draw a subtle pause from Karen, her previously assertive stance softening as the reality of the situation began to register. My eyes scanned her face for any sign of acknowledgement, and I noted the small frown forming, a crack in the mask she had maintained so consistently, revealing the first hint that the tide was beginning to turn. Around us, the neighborhood seemed to exhale along with me, the late afternoon light deepening into richer hues and shadows stretching across the lawn, creating a visual metaphor for the shift in authority, and I felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the patience, documentation, and unwavering attention to detail were starting to yield tangible results. Karen finally lowered her gaze, the once cocky demeanor replaced with a constrained silence, and I allowed myself a subtle nod, a recognition that the moment had shifted irrevocably in my favor, not with force or intimidation, but through methodical persistence and a clear demonstration of lawful rights. The air carried the faint scent of adhesive from the removed stickers, a reminder of the small victory that had been challenged and the tangible evidence of both defiance and compliance, blending into the sensory memory of the confrontation that would remain vivid long after the sun had fully set and the streetlights flickered on, casting their gentle illumination over the quiet cul-de-sac. I felt the weight of the evening settle, not as exhaustion, but as the calm assurance that comes when the meticulous alignment of preparation, timing, and moral clarity begins to manifest in the real world. And in that stillness, I recognized that the first chapter of resolution had been written, with every sense attuned to the subtle triumph unfolding in front of me. The late afternoon shadows were stretching further across the cul-de-sac as I stepped back onto the porch, the subtle warmth of the sun lingering on the railing beneath my hands and the faint scent of summer grass rising from the lawn, mingling with the slightly sweet aroma of the sticker's adhesive that had survived Karen Whitmore's earlier attempts to remove them. I could hear the faint chatter of neighbors drifting from across the street, snippets of conversations about weekend plans and yard maintenance. But my focus remained fixed on the mailbox where the torn edges of paper had fluttered briefly before settling back. Against the metal surface, I ran my fingers along the smooth curve of the corner, feeling the faint ridges of the adhesive still clinging to the surface, a tactile reminder of both the dispute and the legal victory that had yet to fully register in Karen's mind. My thoughts raced back to the hours I had spent compiling photographs, court documents, and correspondence, each one carefully organized, the weight of the folder in my backpack now feeling like a shield of legitimacy and preparation. Karen had shifted uncomfortably, glancing at her own neatly trimmed lawn, her heels clicking against the concrete in a rhythm that seemed almost like nervous pacing, and I noticed a slight tightening in her shoulders, subtle but telling, as if the realization of her overreach was beginning to dawn. I adjusted my stance, letting the light from the setting sun catch the embossed seal on the court order once more, the golden rays glinting off the ink in a way that made the official document almost glow, and I felt a surge of quiet confidence knowing that this tangible proof of authority could not be ignored or dismissed. The air was filled with the scent of pine from the nearby trees and the faint tang of asphalt heated by the earlier sun, creating a sensory backdrop that made every small sound. The rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a passing vehicle, the soft creak of the porch underfoot, feel amplified, as though the world itself was attuned to the subtle power shift unfolding in front of us. I spoke again, this time calmly explaining the specific clauses that had allowed the stickers to remain in place, articulating each point with precision, aware that my measured tone was more persuasive than any raised voice could be, and observing as Karen's expression shifted from irritation to a mixture of disbelief and reluctant acknowledgement. She shifted her weight once more, this time pausing longer, her eyes flicking toward the neighbors who had begun to notice the subtle confrontation, their casual glances turning into curiosity and quiet anticipation, and I sensed that the social element was amplifying the effect of the evidence I presented, making the moment feel larger than just the physical display of the stickers. I ran my hand along the top of the mailbox again, noting the faint warmth from the sun, grounding myself in the tactile reality while mentally tracing the sequence of events that had brought us here, from the filing of the initial request to the patient waiting for court approval, to the strategic collection of proof, and felt a steady calm settle over me as each step in my meticulous plan unfolded exactly as intended. Karen finally lowered her gaze, lips pressing into a thin line, a subtle admission that she had miscalculated, and I allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to cross my face, acknowledging the quiet satisfaction of seeing preparation, patience, and attention to detail begin to yield results in a situation that could have easily spiraled into unnecessary tension. Around us, the street seemed to exhale with the late day, the colors of the sky deepening into richer oranges and purples, the shadows stretching longer across the lawn and sidewalk, and I felt the sense of timing and anticipation that had been building throughout this confrontation crystallize into a moment of clarity and subtle victory. The rustling of the leaves, the faint hum of distant activity, and the lingering smell of the stickers combined into a sensory memory that anchored the experience firmly in the present, reminding me that the resolution was not about spectacle, but about the meticulous alignment of preparation, legality, and moral clarity. And in that still, expanding moment, I understood that the first real acknowledgement of justice had arrived, quiet but undeniable. The sun was dipping lower behind the row of maple trees, painting the cul-de-sac in streaks of gold and amber, and I could feel the last warmth of the day lingering on the railing beneath my hands as I carefully stepped closer to the mailbox, the faint scent of adhesive still clinging to the edges of the stickers mixing with the earthy aroma of freshly mown grass. Karen Whitmore remained on the sidewalk, her posture stiff, heels tapping intermittently against the concrete, each sound echoing slightly in the quiet street, and I could sense the tension in the air, a delicate balance between confrontation and the subtle assertion of rights that had been earned through patience and careful documentation. I pulled the court order from my backpack once more, holding it at an angle that caught the light, the embossed seal glinting faintly, and spoke slowly, articulating each point with precision, emphasizing the permissions granted by the judge and the limitations of her authority, making sure that every word carried clarity and weight without raising my voice. The neighbors, now more aware of the situation, peeked from behind curtains or leaned lightly over fences, their curiosity palpable but unobtrusive, adding an unspoken social layer to the unfolding encounter, a quiet acknowledgement that the rules and the law mattered even in these small, familiar streets. I adjusted my stance, noticing the subtle shift in Karen's expression as the reality of the situation began to settle in. The initial smugness replaced by a flicker of hesitation and acknowledgement that her actions were not supported by any legal authority, and I felt the weight of preparation and patience solidify into a sense of quiet triumph. The soft rustle of leaves in the gentle evening breeze, the distant hum of a car on the main street, and the faint chirping of birds settling in for the night provided a sensory backdrop that made each moment feel more vivid, grounding the confrontation in reality and emphasizing the precision of every gesture and every spoken word. I could see Karen glance again toward the neighboring houses, perhaps assessing the silent audience and realizing that public perception now aligned with legality, and I allowed a subtle, controlled nod to convey my awareness of her recognition without unnecessary escalation. Every detail, the warmth of the sun fading on my skin, the texture of the mailbox under my fingers, the lingering scent of adhesive, and the faint sounds of the street, intertwined into a comprehensive awareness, reinforcing that careful observation and strategic action were central to maintaining both composure and authority. Karen's shoulders relaxed just slightly, a silent admission that she had overstepped, and I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction knowing that the confrontation was resolving not through conflict or force, but through meticulous preparation, adherence to the law, and the steady presentation of undeniable evidence, turning a potentially tense encounter into a demonstration of careful, patient, and inevitable justice. The evening had deepened, the golden light of the setting sun now fading into soft shades of lavender and rose that stretched across the quiet cul-de-sac, and I could feel the cooling air brushing against my skin as I moved closer to the edge of the porch, the textured wood beneath my hands grounding me in the tangible reality of the moment. Karen Whitmore had taken a step back, her posture slightly less rigid than before, yet the tension in her jaw suggested that she was still processing the implications of the court order, and I could see her eyes flicker toward the neighboring homes where curious faces peered from windows and porches, subtly acknowledging the unfolding scenario. I unfolded the top of the court documents, letting the fading sunlight highlight the official seal and the carefully printed details, and began to calmly recount the specific provisions, speaking clearly and deliberately, aware that my voice carried not only to Karen but to anyone within earshot, reinforcing the authority of the law without needing to raise my tone. The faint rustle of leaves in the gentle evening breeze created a quiet accompaniment to my explanation, the scent of pine and warm asphalt blending with the lingering aroma of the stickers, each sensory detail anchoring the moment with vivid immediacy, as if every element of the environment was part of the narrative unfolding in real time. Karen shifted again, her heels making soft, measured clicks against the concrete as she adjusted her stance, and I noted the subtle change in her expression, a fleeting glance of apprehension mixed with a reluctant recognition that her previous actions had exceeded her authority, and I allowed a quiet pause, giving the gravity of the legal proof time to settle into the situation naturally. I stepped slightly closer, keeping my movements deliberate yet unthreatening, my hand tracing the edge of the porch railing as I referenced specific clauses and paragraphs, describing the limits placed on HOA members and the rights afforded to property owners, and I could see her eyes darting from the document to the stickers, the tactile evidence of her attempted interference juxtaposed against the legal validation I held firmly in my hands. The neighbors seemed to settle into a hushed attention, their faint murmurs now a backdrop rather than a distraction, lending an unspoken weight to the encounter as the broader social context became subtly entwined with the legal one, emphasizing that accountability extended beyond personal assertion to include the perception and acknowledgement of the community. I felt a steady calm wash over me, the culmination of preparation, patience, and careful observation converging into this singular moment, the air tinged with the faint scent of adhesive and the earthy aroma of the lawn, grounding every word and gesture in the reality of the environment, while simultaneously underscoring the symbolic nature of the confrontation. Karen exhaled softly, her shoulders easing slightly, a gesture almost imperceptible but meaningful in its acknowledgement, and I could sense that the equilibrium had shifted, the balance of authority now favoring adherence to the law rather than the unchecked assertion of power. The fading light of the day, the cool brush of air, the subtle sounds of distant traffic and settling wildlife, and the lingering sensory traces of the stickers themselves combined into an immersive backdrop, reinforcing the clarity and inevitability of the lawful resolution, and I allowed a small, controlled nod to signify the acknowledgement that the moment had arrived where patience, precision, and adherence to principle had brought the desired understanding to fruition, a quiet yet definitive affirmation of justice achieved. The evening air had cooled further, carrying the subtle fragrance of nearby flowering shrubs mixed with the faintly warm aroma of the sun-baked asphalt as I stood on the edge of the porch, gripping the railing with a steady hand and letting my eyes trace the precise placement of the stickers that had sparked the confrontation earlier. Karen Whitmore lingered a few feet away, her posture now less assertive, the sharp lines of her expression softening as she processed the implications of the court order, her heels pressing into the concrete with a measured rhythm that seemed to punctuate each silent moment between us. I unfolded the court documents once again, letting the official seal catch the fading light, and spoke with deliberate clarity, articulating each relevant clause in full, making sure that the words flowed logically and were reinforced by the tangible evidence in front of us. Each paragraph a reminder that authority was rooted not in intimidation but in lawful documentation. The gentle rustle of leaves in the soft evening breeze, the distant hum of a passing vehicle, and the occasional chirp of a settling bird created a subtle soundtrack that accentuated the calm precision of the moment, while the smell of freshly trimmed grass and the lingering adhesive from the stickers provided a sensory layer that made every movement and gesture feel grounded and vivid. I could see Karen's eyes flicking between the document and the stickers on the mailbox and gate, the juxtaposition of physical proof against her earlier actions creating a moment of clarity, and I allowed a slight pause, giving her time to internalize the significance of what was being presented without forcing a reaction. My own posture remained controlled yet confident, one hand resting lightly on the porch railing while the other held the folder, the tactile weight of the paper serving as a constant reminder of the preparation and diligence that had brought this confrontation to a point of equilibrium. The neighbor's quiet presence, glimpsed through windows and over fences, added an unspoken social dimension, reinforcing the idea that accountability extended beyond individual assertions and into the broader sense of community observation and expectation. As I continued to reference specific portions of the court documents, explaining how each section affirmed the placement of the stickers and delineated the limits of HOA authority, I noticed the subtle signs of concession in Karen's expression, her shoulders relaxing just slightly and her gaze lowering briefly, acknowledging without words that her previous actions had exceeded the bounds of her role. The interplay of fading sunlight, the cooling air, the delicate sounds of the neighborhood settling into evening, and the lingering sense of asphalt and vegetation created an immersive environment in which the conversation unfolded, allowing the demonstration of careful, methodical adherence to law and principle to resonate fully. I felt the satisfaction of seeing preparation and patience manifest into tangible understanding, the shift in the air signaling a quiet but undeniable recognition that justice in its measured, precise form was asserting itself, not through loud confrontation but through clarity, evidence, and steadfast adherence to rights and process, leaving the moment infused with a sense of calm resolution and inevitable correctness that could be sensed in the subtle gestures, attentive glances, and serene stillness surrounding us. The sky had shifted to a deep indigo, the first stars beginning to appear above the cul-de-sac, casting a soft glow over the neatly lined houses, and I could feel the cool evening breeze brushing against my face, carrying the subtle fragrance of the flowering shrubs that bordered my property and the faint warmth lingering from the sun-soaked asphalt. Karen Whitmore stood a few steps away, her posture now more neutral, the earlier tension in her shoulders replaced by a restrained acknowledgement, as if the weight of the documented legal authority was settling into her awareness with measured inevitability. I held the court order in one hand, the embossed seal catching the faint light from the street lamp that had just flickered on, and my other hand rested lightly on the porch railing, grounding me as I spoke slowly and deliberately, reiterating the essential points that affirmed the placement of the stickers and delineated the limits of her authority within the homeowners association. The distant hum of a passing car on the main street, the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle night breeze, and the faint chirping of crickets created a subtle, natural soundtrack that contrasted with the focused intensity of the exchange, making each word and gesture resonate with clarity and purpose. I stepped slightly closer to the mailbox, letting my fingertips brush against the smooth surface, feeling the remnants of adhesive from the carefully placed stickers, each tactile sensation reinforcing the tangible reality of the dispute and the undeniable evidence that supported my position. Karen's eyes moved from the court documents to the stickers, her gaze lingering on the evidence of her previous interference, and I could see a flicker of understanding, a quiet recognition that her initial assumptions about authority had been incomplete, replaced by the concrete validation of law and principle. The neighbors, now aware of the unfolding situation, maintained a respectful distance, their quiet presence lending a sense of communal observation that emphasized the importance of accountability, not only through legal documentation but also through the social recognition of rightful action. I continued to speak with measured precision, referencing specific paragraphs and clauses, letting the words flow in a calm, assertive cadence that reinforced the legitimacy of my position without resorting to any form of confrontation, and each subtle pause allowed the weight of the evidence to fully register in Karen's demeanor. The combination of fading natural light, the gentle evening sounds, the subtle aromas of flora and asphalt, and the tactile evidence of the stickers created an immersive environment, heightening the awareness of each participant and observer, making the unfolding resolution feel both inevitable and carefully orchestrated. Karen finally exhaled quietly, her shoulders relaxing completely, a silent concession that she had overstepped her role, and I allowed a slight, controlled smile to form, acknowledging the quiet victory achieved through preparation, patience, and adherence to principle rather than loud confrontation. The subtle interplay of light and shadow, the soft night breeze, and the lingering scents combined to create a cinematic atmosphere, reinforcing the sense that justice had been served through clarity, careful documentation, and steadfast commitment to right, leaving the moment infused with the calm satisfaction of order restored and an unspoken affirmation that meticulous attention to detail and lawful persistence had prevailed. The evening had fully settled over the cul-de-sac, the sky a deep navy blue with scattered stars beginning to glimmer faintly above, casting a soft, ethereal light across the neatly lined houses and manicured lawns, and I could feel the gentle chill in the air brushing against my skin while carrying the subtle scent of pine and freshly mown grass from the neighboring yards. Karen Whitmore stood a few steps away, her posture now neutral and less rigid than it had been moments before, her eyes reflecting a combination of acknowledgement and the quiet processing of the legal reality that had been presented with calm precision, and I sensed that the initial tension between us had dissolved into a mutual understanding framed by clarity and correctness rather than confrontation. I held the court order carefully in one hand, letting the official seal catch the dim glow of the streetlights that had flickered on, and in the other hand, I gestured lightly toward the stickers that remained affixed to the mailbox and gate, each one a tangible symbol of the carefully upheld legal permission and the culmination of meticulous documentation and preparation. The gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the faint hum of a passing car along the main street, and the soft chirping of crickets settling into the night formed a natural soundtrack, emphasizing the calm and deliberate pace at which the situation had resolved, highlighting the contrast between the earlier confrontation and the present state of quiet resolution. I spoke in measured tones, reiterating the key points that affirmed the legality of the sticker placement and delineated the limits of HOA authority, ensuring that each word carried clarity and purpose, reinforcing the principle that lawful patience and attention to detail could effectively maintain order without the need for escalation. Karen's gaze lingered on the stickers, and I noticed the subtle easing of her shoulders, a silent concession to the validity of the evidence and the careful presentation of rights and responsibilities, signaling the first moment of genuine acknowledgement that the overreach had been recognized. Around us, the neighborhood seemed to exude a calm attentiveness, neighbors quietly observing from behind windows and fences, their presence adding a layer of communal awareness that underscored the social reinforcement of accountability alongside the legal framework, as if the collective observation of the community itself had contributed to the subtle authority now manifest in the exchange. I allowed a brief pause to let the weight of the situation fully register, feeling the texture of the porch railing under my fingertips and the faint lingering adhesive on the stickers beneath the cool evening air, grounding the moment in sensory reality as much as in the logical clarity of documentation. Each small sound, the rustling leaves, the distant traffic, the occasional chirp of a night bird, accentuated the deliberate calm with which the interaction had unfolded, every element contributing to the cinematic quality of the evening and to the sense that resolution had been achieved through preparation, patience, and adherence to principle. I observed Karen exhaling softly, a sign of the subtle mental shift that confirmed her recognition of proper boundaries and lawful authority. And in that gentle, almost imperceptible gesture, I felt the quiet satisfaction of seeing justice manifest through careful, deliberate, and strategic adherence to process, leaving the moment imbued with the calm affirmation that attention to detail, methodical preparation, and steadfast commitment to correctness had guided the outcome to an inevitable, undeniable resolution. The night had fully settled over the neighborhood, the sky now a deep velvet dotted with countless stars, and the gentle glow from the street lamps cast soft pools of light across the quiet cul-de-sac, illuminating the neatly kept lawns and the silhouettes of trees swaying slightly in the evening breeze. I stood at the edge of the porch, my hand resting lightly on the railing, feeling the cool texture beneath my fingers and the subtle warmth that still lingered from the fading sun, while my eyes traced the perfectly aligned stickers on the mailbox and gate, each one a small but undeniable symbol of careful preparation, lawful authority, and patience rewarded. Karen Whitmore had stepped back fully now, her expression neutral but subdued, and I could sense that the realization of proper boundaries and the limits of her authority had fully settled into her awareness, the rigid tension of earlier replaced by a quiet, reflective stillness. The faint hum of a passing car along the main street, the soft rustle of leaves, and the occasional chirp of nocturnal wildlife created a natural ambience, accentuating the serenity and the weight of the moment, reinforcing that this resolution had been achieved not through loud confrontation, but through meticulous adherence to principle and process. I took a slow breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs, noticing the lingering scent of adhesive from the stickers mingling with the earthy aroma of the grass, each sensory detail anchoring me in the reality of the scene, while simultaneously underscoring the significance of what had transpired. The subtle acknowledgement in Karen's posture, the way her eyes briefly met mine before dropping respectfully to the ground, communicated a recognition that had not been present before, a silent concession that the law and careful preparation had guided the outcome rather than personal preference or arbitrary authority. Around us, the neighborhood remained hushed, the quiet presence of neighbors behind curtains and over fences adding an unspoken dimension of social awareness, emphasizing that accountability, even in small communities, is amplified by observation and integrity. I felt a steady calm and satisfaction settle over me as I surveyed the stickers, the porch, and the surrounding street, knowing that the careful documentation, the methodical planning, and the patient presentation of facts had culminated in a moment of undeniable validation, where right and law had prevailed without spectacle or escalation. The interplay of night shadows, soft light, gentle wind, and subtle sounds created a cinematic tapestry, enhancing the depth of the moment and solidifying the lesson that justice, when executed with clarity, attention to detail, and persistent adherence to principle, manifests inevitably and quietly, yet leaves a profound impact on everyone present. As I placed my hand lightly on one of the stickers, feeling the texture and the slight give of the adhesive beneath my fingers, a quiet sense of closure and completion filled me, a recognition that preparation, patience, and steadfast commitment to right had shaped a resolution that was both tangible and lasting, leaving the evening calm, measured, and infused with the quiet affirmation that the balance of justice had been restored.